Using frequencies for testing chi-squares. We've used JUMP to test the proportions using frequencies in the EEAS example. Let's return to the ECMO study. The Lancet paper shows the results for 177 subjects, and so there would be 177 rows in the data table. However, we actually saw that we could do this with simply creating a 4-row data table in JUMP rather than having to have access to the original data. Remember, when you're dealing with categorical variables and you have a contingency table, you will need one JUMP row for every cell in your table. So with 177 people, you could see here that we could have had a data table that had 177 rows with 2 columns. One column with the treatment, ECMO or CM, and one column with their status, where they survived or did not survive. But you often don't have access to this when you are reading published research articles. What you have is the paper and you have the table. And sometimes you only have half of the table. So sometimes you simply have the proportion that survived. And in this case, just the proportion that survived in ECMO or CM. But if you have the total counts, then you can figure out the number that did survive and the number that didn't survive from any paper that you read and create a table that looks like what we have seen. So instead of 2 columns and 177 rows, we have 4 rows and 3 columns, a column for treatment and a column for status, and then the column for the N, or the frequency, that tells us how many of those rows have that exact same treatment and status combination. What we need to remember to do, as we've seen in the past, is let JUMP know that that N is the frequency, and you do that under the columns menu, Preselect role and frequency. So again, under the columns menu, once you've selected the N, go into the columns menu, Preselect role, and select it as a frequency. And that way, every analysis that you do, especially when you do the fit Y by X, this is a very simple example, you will actually see that the N is pre-selected as the frequency. It's important to note that frequency columns must be numeric. So even if the data comes to you in character form, you need to make sure to tell JUMP that it is a numeric variable. It is a count. You can also change it from numeric, from categorical to numeric in the columns menu under column information. If you do it this way, if you take your 2x2 table and create a new data set or a frequency table in JUMP, you will get the same results as if you had a single row for each of your subjects. You would do a fit Y by X, and you can see here, since we pre-selected the role, that already shows up in the frequency option as our N. And in our case, we have a treatment as our X, and we have status as our Y. Our treatment was set up or selected, or people were randomized to the treatments prior to the status being measured. So we have a natural X and a natural Y here, but I urge you to switch them in JUMP, put status as X and treatment as Y, and see what happens. And you'll notice that some of the statistics are very similar, in fact, identical to when you have it set up the other way. But for now, we have treatment as X and status as Y. And that makes it very, very helpful because you can then take any published research study and look at their tables, and they don't even have to give you the full 2x2 table. They could just give you the proportion that had the outcome of interest and the total N in each group. And from that, you could get the 2x2 table. Now, sometimes you may have to round up or down in a count, but you'd get very close to be able to utilize published data as preliminary data for what you are studying. As long as you have the cell counts, you can test hypotheses and categorical data. It's really, really a great option when you are looking around for research in your field to understand how they came to their conclusions. It's important to remember that you can use the question tool in JUMP. So up in the menu bar, instead of the arrow for your cursor, you can switch to the question mark. And then anywhere that you click with the question mark will open up JUMP Help online if you're connected to the internet. and it will take you to that platform and the area that you clicked on and provide you more information there. So we've compared two proportions. It's very similar to comparing a single proportion to an assumed proportion. We can do it with a z-score or a chi-square. It can be done by hand, or what's mostly recommended, do it by software, because then you're assured that you've done it correctly, you don't have any math errors, and you don't have to worry about rounding off. Remember, if you find a difference in the two proportions, include the 95% confidence interval on the difference in your summary. If you do not find a difference, report the overall or average proportion in your summary as well. Up next, we'll see how to do this in JUMP. After that, we'll take a closer look at the chi-square test for extending it to proportions or multiple groups with larger than a 2 by 2 table.